Alright, let's take a look at the Tauri Splashscreen feature. If your web page could take some time to load, or if you need to run an initialization procedure in Rust before displaying your main window, the splash screen could improve the loading experience for the user. Pretty straightforward. First, create a splashscreen.html in your dist dir that contains the HTML code for a splash screen. Then update your Tauri conf JSON like so. This is definitely one way of doing it. When I do it, I tend to actually use the front-end framework I'm using. This guide is going to suggest that you create just a static HTML, which it's fine, but in the real world scenario, you probably wouldn't do this. I would, for example, in Nuxt create a special splash screen page or something like that. Body splash. We're just gonna keep this very, very simple because we don't need to actually make it fancy. We're just looking at the feature. Now let's go to Windows and we'll add the splash screen window. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Not very copy-paste friendly, because this is what happens. In fact, there shouldn't... This part I can kind of see why, because it makes it more... I want something copy-paste friendly. That's all I'll say. I can't copy-paste it. It's not very noob friendly. And again, with these comments, like I get why they're there, but explain it in the text and let me copy paste instead. So what we did now was we set the main window to being invisible at the start. We're just gonna set that to main. So now we have one window, slightly smaller, that just displays splashscreen.html. With this URL parameter, you're capable of overriding which HTML document that window gets loaded with. So this will ensure that when your app runs, these two windows are created, but only this one is visible. This one will load index.html. This one will load splashscreen.html. So if we now run this, we'll close that. We're reusing our project from last time. That's why you can see dist isolation there. I can't actually move that because we made it so very bare bones. Let's just fix that with data Tauri drag region and style width 100, viewport width, height 1 centimeter, and display block. It's we'll find background. See it. Let's see if that gave that is not good enough. That's what I wanted. So what am I missing here? It doesn't actually have the content that I am looking for. The question is, did I mess up? No? So now the question is, does this maybe have to be the question right now is, where do we get that from during development? During the development, I'm guessing that would be actually up here, maybe? Yeah, okay. That fixed it. So, little sort of issue with the guide. It tells you to create splashscreen.html in the dist folder, which is correct for production, but during development, I have to place it in the same place as index.html. So if I use the vanilla template, this placing it in dist wouldn't work. But anyway, you can see our little splash screen here, and you can't see the main window. That's great. The next part we want to do is we want to wait for the web page. If you're waiting for your web code, you'll want to create a close splash screen command. I haven't covered commands yet, but we will eventually. We'll create a new command, close splash screen. It expects a window, so we will do window. It's just that I'm gonna shut down that for a while. And I'm gonna close that one. And this expects window, Tauri, window. Tauri will automatically add this, by the way. As long as you just specify this, when the command comes in, this will automatically resolve to the window that called the command. We don't need to return anything. And what we want to do is just this. We want to close the splash screen. If let some splash screen, where that variable gets set to the return value of window get window splash screen. Wild guess. Use Tauri. Yeah. And I'm just used to putting the use parts at the very top. But here we get now. I don't know why we don't just add this by default, because it does fix things like this. Actually, they have it at the top in there. It's just that it's not in the top of the templates. We should probably add use Tauri manager at the top of all templates as well, just to avoid this kind of issue. What we're doing is we're getting the splash screen. So when this command has ran, splash screen will be set to get window splash screen, and then in this if statement, this is a little bit of a weird Rust syntax, but it's essentially saying if we get a window back from this, which is some and instead of none, then set that variable to splash screen so that it's available in this context. Looks very weird, but once you understand it, it makes more sense. Because if we read this in as regular English, if set the variable splash screen to the return value of window get window splash screen, it makes a little bit more sense maybe. But we close the splash screen immediately and unwrap the result. Not actually sure why we unwrap here, but there we go. Window get window main unwrap show unwrap. Again, not entirely sure why we have to unwrap that. I would have assumed we would have had to wait, but regardless. So all we're doing when we call this command, hide the splash screen, show the main window. Great. Now we have to add that command, close splash screen, so that it's available to our app. Then in the JavaScript end, we're going to look at DOM content loaded, which we have here already from the vanilla template. Do we have invoke? Yes, we have invoke already. And all we're going to do now is at the bottom of this, we're going to close the splash screen. So what this should do now is just have the splash screen flash by really fast and then open our main page, which it did. Unfortunately, you couldn't see it because it went too fast, so what we're going to do is we're going to fake that there's a lot more to load in the front end. Set timeout, and we're going to wait maybe 5 seconds. Isn't this the syntax? Yeah. This, by the way, really nice and neat to have. So now we're waiting for 5,000 milliseconds. And, oh shit. God damn it, I was gonna drag the window and I accidentally dragged around my OBS settings. I should actually just everything is locked now in OBS, so it doesn't matter. There, you can see that. If we make an edit, that's not enough, so let's open that again. I really need to figure out how I can get the window to pop up on the right screen. So here we have the splash screen. Wait a few seconds, and boom, you have the main window. Awesome. So now we've created a splash screen that works entirely on the JavaScript end, or rather it only waits in the JavaScript end. If you had something heavy to wait for, you would replace the set timeout with just invoking this as soon as possible after you're done loading. If you're waiting for Rust code to run, put it in the setup function handler so you have access to the app instance. Alright, let's take a look at how they want us to do that. We can remove this splash screen handler and go back into main RS. Now they want us to have a setup function, which we do. Let splash screen window be the return value of get splash screen. Let main window be the return of main. Fair enough. We perform the initialization code on a new task so that the app doesn't freeze. So what we're doing here with this is that we're running a function in the background. So we don't freeze this way. It won't block on this. It won't stop at executing this. It'll send this off to the asynchronous runtime, and it will wait for 2 seconds just to be consistent with what I did before. We're going to wait for 5 seconds. Print done initializing and do the exact same steps as before, which was closing and opening. And yeah, if we just run this, we can see the splash screen pop up. Now we wait for a few seconds and boom, we have the main window showing. And there really isn't much more to show you regarding splash screens. I wouldn't do it quite this way. With a splash screen like this, I would have made it in your actual front-end framework, so you can make it look nice and handle everything from there. One thing you could do in such an occasion, depending on how your framework works, is you could have something like that. You could just have a splash screen. There's all kinds of ways you can set up the URL to handle that. And yeah, I really don't have much else to say. Some critique on the documentation. This isn't copy-paste friendly. I do think that these comments, I understand why they're there, but again, I want to be able to copy-paste stuff. And this suggestion of putting it in dist dir, it only works for production, and when you're doing a tutorial, you want it to work in development. So I don't think there's a single framework where this approach would have ever worked, because that would have only ever worked in production. So that should probably be changed with a slightly longer text on how you can create it. There's also no example splash screen here. I would have also liked to copy paste basically this content. Now I had to make that myself and make it work, and it's not a huge deal, but I know what I'm doing. Everyone doesn't know what they're doing. And other than that, there's not much else to say. It's a pretty simple functionality, and worked great. So yeah, that's it for this video. See you in the next one. Bye.